Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Sorry guys, just hang in there. I'm adjusting the sound. Okay. So welcome everyone. Tonight's episode, I want to focus on when individuals access collective fields naturally, and in the subtitle I've written post-paradigm of the shattered. So this episode is focused on something that I feel is going to happen in the future, and it's going to take the human being to a crossroad. Now that crossroad is going to give us access to a state that either through nature we get to it first, we realize it first as a collective species, or through cyberspace. These are the two options. So what is it that I'm talking about? Okay, first thing. Before I can speak about collectivism or individualism, we gotta see what is the starting point. My starting point for this talk is the idea that on a rock in the middle of nowhere, 8 billion creatures have arrived. Now, these 8 billion creatures are experiencing reality. That means if in 2021, let's say a time traveler from the future came back, we would say this was a time when we had one body and one mind. And we didn't even know what the mind is. That means the only reason we're considering that we have one mind is because one body is moving, right? That means this is a very deep philosophical question. How many minds does a person have, right? The only reason we consider it singular is because the whole body is moving in consciousness. There could be a chance that we have our mind is in multiple dimensions, and it's as if, what's a good example of this? Just like there's statues of gods in India that had 3 heads, 3 faces on their head, it's as if the eyes of the being was open to 3 dimensions. If we are inside more than one dimension, that means imagine we have one body, and we have one right now, currently in 2021, I would define it as one known body and one unknown mind. Now let's say, here's where the crossroad happens. So anything I'm saying in this episode, people can see it happen in cyberspace, and people can see it happen in nature. So right now in nature, it's one conscious, one known body and one unknown mind. Now, because the mind is unknown and we're considering its individualism due to the body, the unknown mind could not be an object and could be multi-present, so that means we have multiple bodies, but we're not aware of it. That could be the case. I'm not saying that's it. even though ancient thought points to chakras being our subtler self in different dimensions, that means one view of the chakras is that, all right, you're one being and you have seven spiraling wheels of energy, seven spiraling wheel points, portals in your body. Or you can consider that every chakra is the presence of the mind in a subtler dimension. And the cool thing about the chakras is that the seventh chakra is not sensory based. That means the seventh chakra, technically, you don't exist in order to access that. What I mean by that is that it's as if, like, not poetically, but like in accordance to what was said, for example, in Kundalini Yoga, the energies are being taken to the forehead, right? That means people are trying to open their chakras. They start from their root chakra and they go towards their crown chakra. Now, the concept of the crown chakra is in some sense the universal identity unlocking, right? So I would say that the crown chakra is like the God self. The activation of the crown chakra is like God living, God moving man. That means it's as if man's eyes were God's from the beginning. That's kind of like what I'm trying to say from the crown chakra perspective, like when one gets to that. But anyways, back to the idea that right now we have one known body and then we have an unknown mind. And, spiritual people consider the unknown mind to have deeper roots and to be way more multidimensional, and in some sense secular people don't. The body is more convincing than anything else that the mind can be doing to the materialist. Now, in the future, here's the option. We can have pretty much multiple here's the chart, here's the geometry. Right now, one option is one mind, one body. Another option is one mind, multiple bodies. Another option is multiple minds, one body. And the other option is excuse me. To continue, sorry guys, there was an interruption. So one mind, one body, one mind, multiple bodies, multiple minds, one body, and multiple minds, multiple bodies. One mind, one body, we call that human consciousness. I would say one mind, one mind, one body, that's the human being. One mind, multiple bodies, we call that God, God consciousness. Now, multiple minds being in one body, we call that I feel it's fair to call that the demiurge, or multiple minds, one body would be in some sense. What's an example of that? I got it. Multiple minds, one body would in some sense be as if like multiple worlds and one body in it. We don't have a word for this. I don't think human beings have created a word for this. Multiple bodies in one mind would be... Anyways, I know, let's move on to the next one. The other one is multiple minds, multiple bodies. This, I would say, is in some sense the collective. This is a collective being. And I guess the multiple minds, one body, we could call that the collective individual. There we go, I got it. So one mind, one body, that's an individual. One mind, multiple bodies, we call that the individual collective, which is God. We're going from the singular to the multiple. And then we have the collective individual, and then we have the collective. There we go. So this is the best way to kind of say it. So in the future, when human beings are wondering about the relationship of their psychology and their physiology, and when I say in the future, guys, I'm talking about a point in the future where either cyberspace comes into the picture, and through computer technology, we all connect to the same server of consciousness. So a person can be anywhere in the world and their mind could log in, literally go into a giant inner realm. Now, we have the individual collective God that was in our past. We're probably going towards the collective individual and then the collective being. I will honestly say the concept of God was a phase of our evolution. From an individual alone in the universe, we personified the universe, and all of it was one individual being. God consciousness can be naturally accessed. I will tell you the mystics, and I've personally experienced, but I don't talk about it because it's truly something that goes beyond the language threshold. But I have experienced this one mind, multiple bodies. That means I've experienced moments where I can tell you through my selflessness and stillness and silence, I have observed selfhood simulating somewhere else, but through an embodiment. I've experienced this once in a dream, and I'll tell you the dream. And I've experienced this in reality in the conscious waking state, but when I experienced it in the conscious waking state, there was no self, but there was intelligent movement. So it's kind of like realizing everything that is moving everybody is the same, is one moment. It's as if man said, how does God watch all the human beings, all the creatures in the world, you know? And the answer came because it's in one moment. Angela in the chat section says, do you think we have multiple bodies and consciousness here on the plane? Yeah, I'm getting to that. So guys, keep in mind, in this episode so far, I've shared 4 possible modalities of mind and body, or physiology and psychology. I named them one mind, one body as the individual. I named the one mind and multiple bodies as the God, the individual, collective, the God archetype. The multiple minds, one body, for now the only word I have for it is collective, and the collective individual, and we don't have a word for this, a legit word for this, because it hasn't arose. That time hasn't come yet. So in the future, the legend of the collective individual will be born, and in the way future after that, the legend of the collective being will be born. And the collective being is a phase where human beings, their egos are becoming like drops of water that have been separate and suddenly realize they can become a river. However, in this episode, I've written naturally at the end of the sentence. So I have to explain to you how naturally we can access it. So let's think about these 4 possibilities, each from their simplest and complex view. So the individual mind and the individual body. This is our current life right now, and we know that in order to take care of the individual body, we got to pay attention to the environment and survive. So survival is the strategy to maintaining your individual body. And in some sense, for the mind, you can say the strategy, it's not being shared to people, but really your mind is kept healthy through exploration. The same way the body needs food, the mind needs vision. So the individual strategy to cultivating our mind is exploring our world. And pretty much meditation is a type of advanced, psychological exploration. So we explore our minds and we survive as bodies. That's the current phase. That's 2021. Now, before 2021, during the times where it was one mind moving multiple bodies, that could be seen as either the God archetype, or it could be seen as forces moving the animal unconsciously without it realizing. That means an example of a collective mind, the example of one mind, multiple bodies would be like a wind blowing the leaves on the ground. All the leaves are blown by the same intelligence. Now, if the leaf is conscious of it or unconscious of it, that changes it. So in our past, we were just this unconscious biological organism just moving around, having no good or bad or value system, just animal instincts and biological programming. And so our unconscious evolution has been that phase, but you can say in the 6th century, that was a sort of conscious, something interesting you find in all religions is that the religion is tackling an existential question, and the existential question is, where is life heading? To the religious person, they will realize it is God's will. God's will means there is one mind, and every body, everything in the universe is moving by that mind. So I would say the religious paradigm, religious techniques, mystical techniques, even meditation, when you attain the ultimate samadhi, the union of the individual and the collective movement, this is also available now, but also was in the past. So the individual collective, that its strategy is pretty much observance. So so I would say, if you have if you have one mind, the strategy should be exploration. If you have multiple bodies, okay, now collective survival would mean organization, right? So I would say for multiple bodies, they require organized survival. Organized coordination. So what that means is it's as if like if the world had a mind and everything in the world was the body of that mind. Right now, the human psychology is responsible at most for itself, family, friends, and species. But imagine you had to be responsible for the whole universal sector, for everything in existence. Now, let's go to multiple minds, one body. I can technically envision this in my inner realms, how it will look like. So what it would look like is that one person will be able to connect their heads, connect their mind to cyberspace and experience everybody else's imagination. Like right now, what's happening? I'm giving a live stream and my voice is being shared with the audience. That means if I hear, like in my inner realms, if I think like, the weather is nice, like people, and I share that vocally, it's as if people get access to what's going on behind my eyes. So imagine in the future we get to a point where the live stream becomes so intense, not only can people hear my voice, they can know exactly how I'm feeling when I'm giving the talk, or even more, they can see my inner realms before I speak it, right? So it would be as if we all have our own individual minds, and if the mind was a space, there would be a door, and that door would connect us to the collective server in cyberspace. Now, you can say multiple minds, one body. That could be another sense of how an individual in this dimension is being a collective in another. Imagine having collective minds in one body. So you can say a person who has multiple personalities is actually experiencing a very low level of this. You know, what that means is in the future, it's going to be multiple conscious personalities. So what that means is, imagine a group of friends, like that show Friends. Who were their names, you know? Like Phoebe, Monica, Rachel, Joey, Ross, and Chandler, right? So these guys, imagine they're friends, and every day they're hanging out in like the same coffee shop. Okay, so it's as if they're in the same physical room, and they're each individual bodies, individual minds. Now, in the future, the friends of the future would be something where they don't need to move. Wherever they are, they can be in the coffee shop at any time, where they're all there together. So it would be something like that, where another dimension of perception, which all can access to, will become like a collective server of mind. Which means we bridge the gaps between the minds. That means for the first time we infuse inner realms. And this is, I would say this is very much in the future. It's not something where we're not even psychologically as a species ready. Like, we don't even know how to acknowledge a collective individual in the future. Imagine you talk to someone and that person's like, by the way, you know, there's 5 other, you know, consciousness, you know, 5 other types of consciousness also in my mind. Like, imagine you're having a conversation with someone, but their inner realm server, their inner realm space is connected to others. So what that means is, pretty much any time human beings get tired of moving their body, this is like in the future where collective mindhood through cyberspace is achieved. Anytime someone is tired using their body, another consciousness comes in and uses their body. And the moment they're energetic, then they use their body. Do you understand what I mean? It would be a point where right now we think, let's just entertain the idea of the soul. We think there is one soul and one body. But I feel in the future, when it hits this point of the collective individual, it would be as if your soul is hopping through the body of everyone. I mean, that would be the final stage, where multiple minds and multiple bodies. That would be the final stage, where souls are no longer just individually experiencing their biology. That means you get to experience multiple biological bodies before you die. Right now we get to experience only one. Right? So that would be the era of the collective individual. After that, when it becomes multiple minds, multiple bodies, that means for the first time, it doesn't matter where consciousness is. It's another way of saying we truly go beyond the language threshold, and beyond the language threshold, it is a state where there is no object and there is no subject. If there is no object, there is no matter. If there is no subject, there is no movement of matter or change of matter, there is no time. So that means we are evolving to a timeless state if we consider there to be like 2 dimensions. A dimension where our body is evolving, and a dimension where our body is in which that is evolving. You know, right now we're living in an era in 2021 where people take how the body is creating the mind. They're not taking how the mind is creating the body seriously. This guy's, the reason I'm repeating is because it got disconnected. I don't know if people heard it. So pretty much the idea of this episode is, if we want to bypass cyberspace, or avoid it, or find another method, that means before individual mind and individual body, before one of them collectivizes, becomes collective, becomes multiple, we in some sense before the collective individual appears, that means here, I'll say it like this. Past was, how would I say it? The past was one mind, multiple bodies. The present is multiple, the present is one body, one mind. The future is going to be first multiple minds, then one body, then it's going to be multiple minds, multiple bodies. This is going to be the progression. This is how I feel, at least. So I would suggest that maybe in 3,600 years, there's going to be no concept of a creature anymore. So in 3,600 years, I feel, and it may be sooner, it may be later, who knows. I don't think it's going to be later, but I feel in 3,600 years, that will be an era of complete multidimensional, multiple mind, multiple body. It's like that theory is that approach is gonna be reality, you know. And I don't know, guys, but I have a feeling, you know, maybe the future generations might hear this talk and wonder, like, how is Mr.Within saying this? I personally feel the future is a timeless collective being. The future has already advanced. I don't know how to say it, but it's as if like the future has nowhere to go. It's only the past that has somewhere to go to the future. I would say the final future in some sense. Now, in order to access it in nature, so to the main point that how can we let me how can we have multiple minds in one body naturally? If you, as a, let's say, meditator or a mystic, you find yourself in a meditative state where you notice that your one mind only was there because there was one body. If you identify, let's say, on an elemental level, excuse me. Sorry guys, there was an interruption. I was saying that if you identify with the elemental realm, that means if your body becomes all the physical phenomena in your moment of being, that's another way of saying that we accessed multiple bodyhood, one mind. The moment we have multiple bodies, the intelligence can fathom a mind to each of them. So you, in some sense, function in a universe where not only you have seen a mind to the object that you are, but everything that can be fathomed into some sort of structure in, how would I say it, in the space of the unknown, can change. I'll tell you an example of how I experience multiple mind, multiple body, or multiple minds in one body. Multiple minds in one body, it's very easy. You just remember what mind you had yesterday, and if you can remember it, you have two minds in the moment. You have the access to the type of mind you had yesterday, the perception, and the perception today. So we can say our memories are like a sort of multiple mind. I would say if a person perceives a personality in their inner realms, let's say a person, like for example René Descartes, there's a story ascribed to him that he was like 28 in a barracks and an angel appears to him, and the angel says to René Descartes that the next conquest of nature is through something like math. It says through number and measurement, through measurement and number. So that angel could be said to be multiple, two minds in one body. Or two moving archetypes in the inner realms. And I feel the idea of the advanced civilization, the idea of humanity, as if humanity is like the hive mind. And its one body is just the human species, as if like we are gonna be so advanced in the future, it's gonna appear as if appear as if there are no people, there's just the spirit of humanity moving humans. When it gets to a point where it's multiple mind and multiple body, that's literally like the gas, like the air inside a balloon. Imagine somehow balloons could connect each of the air inside each balloon could move around, you know, could move around among them. That's what I'm trying to say. So, I don't know, I would say observing the inner realms. I mean, here's the challenge for the human psyche. We don't know what else we can be if we're not an individual. We don't know if it's going to be like multiple senses of self. We don't know if it's going to be a river of selfhood where the self is changing in every moment. We don't know if we're going to access infinite selfhood. That means there's endless selves, and this whole time we have been cherry picking our identities out of an ocean of information. And you know, the most bizarre suggestion of a future where there is multiple minds in one body, that means for the first time, that would be the extinction of vocal communication. The moment we access collective mindhood, there's no reason to speak anymore. This is why religions even give a clue where the more you go to truth through the ancient traditions, right, the more you're going towards silence and stillness. That means the more selfless you are, the more the whole world is yourself. But the more individual we are, it's as if we are in a world. You see, here's the very fascinating thing. Even though right now I'm a biological human being and I'm made of atoms, particles of the periodic table, elements of the periodic table. It's like the only thing that is separating, even though the body is separate from the planet, the only thing separating me from the world to myself is the consciousness. That means our individualism is actually how we enter an individual thought. There is no such thing as the individual, right? And especially if you get deep into Buddhist thought, they have this concept of interdependence. That means the only reason we're being human is because there's trees, because there's an atmosphere, and the only reason there's an atmosphere is because there's trees. Do you see? It's as if everything is interdependent. We have been just creating our own isolation from the universal event. So Angela, in the chat section, you say, do you think we have multiple bodies and consciousness here on the plane? I'm telling you, all the bodies you can fathom are in the domain of your consciousness. That means right now, as I'm talking, I could think I'm a good person. That's a sort of inner body. Or let me say it another way. If I think I'm a good person, that's a type of self. If I think I'm a bad person, that's a type of self. And there is multiple bodies in universal intelligence. So right now, I could just think, it's impossible because the mind provides an awareness outside of the body. Like we can't see inside ourselves, right? We can't see inside our skin. We as creatures, as biological creatures, are designed to have a first-person point of view, as if the eyes are designed to look in front of us. The eyes are not designed to, spin a certain direction. It's the same with our hands. If anybody's listening to me, look at your biological hand. Just look at your hand, right? Now, try to touch your fingers to your wrist. You see, you can do that. Now try to touch your fingers from the wrist from the other side. You see, there's limits. If the veil of the senses, that means if there was no moving force, in some traditions they call it the prime mover. That means it's as if we don't know what it is. It's just something unknown. Some unknown force is moving, and it's interpreting its own movement as free will in a character, in a world story format. I think something fascinating will happen in the era of the collective individual, I think communication will not stop. There will still be individual bodies talking to one another, but I think what will happen is that for the first time, human culture becomes in 2 dimensions. That means it's as if people will be living in technically 2 worlds, or I would say 3 worlds. Or I don't know, I don't think I can say 3 worlds, because it's going to be the inner realm connected to cyberspace somehow. Because we're trying to not just connect the brain to the technology, we're trying to somehow connect the mind, the consciousness. There's no point of connecting a brain to a technology where the brain gets fried, or there's too much power, much information. The way cyberspace has to be designed is that the person opens a door through their free will to enter the cyberspace room. That way people have a sort of karmic entrance into the simulation. In my inner realms, I have perceived my own body differently. I have perceived my vision differently. There is moments in this life where it's like there is no memory. It's like there's nothing to do with the past anymore. It's as if like the past happened and completed, and even though there is a memory of it, the memory is kind of like just a checkpoint of how the past, how far you went. Once the past is complete, we find ourselves in the present. The present is a strange state, because in the present there is no past and there isn't a future yet. If a person doesn't exert any force in the present, there is literally nothing. That means if the human animal attains its psychology through its actions, if a human being doesn't do anything, what kind of psychology can they have, right? I have experienced moments where there has been no self and it's just my whole moment moving. It's like the moment I realize everything I have ever thought, or every memory, or every visualization, or any activity, it's all happening in the presence of a moment that is being. If human beings understand that as the poet Rumi says, you're not just a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in the drop. When we realize we're the entire ocean in the drop, there would be no fear. There would be literally no self. That means there would be no individual drop afraid of an individual drop's destiny. It's as if in the middle of a temporary object's life, a collective field of subjective infinitude was accessed. And just by the exposure to communication, the moment we really notice something happening, it unlocks for us too, The future is not going to be strange. The future potentially may not exist after 3,600 years. Technically, I speak about the concept of extinction, and I say there's an outer extinction and inner extinction. Cyberspace could mean a sort of inner extinction. It could mean that there will never be a pure natural personality anymore the moment there's exposure to cyberspace. You see, the idea, at least my vision, is not to confirm the arbitrary, but to find myself in a civilization that wants to cultivate all dimensions of its perception. That means the person's not trying to attach to superstition through a Freudian lens of fear. The person's afraid, so they're like, yeah, my imagination will save me. It's not the case. It's more like whatever we are in the moment. Now we begin understanding it by observing it, right? And if we have the concept of mind, how dare we, act as if it doesn't exist? Then why is the concept there? The concept exists, and the concept is there because when we look at matter, we don't understand what moves it. The human being attained name and consciousness of form. And the moment it did, then there was someone to understand the world. But when we go back in history, there was no one. There was biological bodies of creature, but there was no one. There was no self-awareness to the complexity we're experiencing now, at least. I will recommend, if anybody in the future, from the future, I would say if anybody listens to this episode and they work in the tech sector on this planet, any sort of tech sector, the most important thing is not to bring in a wave of traumatization through luxury by having the human brain connect to machine. You see, there is something dangerous where I feel all atheists and materialists are being rounded up like sheep to be the first ones to, in some sense, infuse with the machines. And there's a danger there, right? Because let me tell you what the danger is. The danger is the introduction of an unnatural movement in the psyche. That means it's like, imagine like a person does something wrong and they feel their conscience. Now, if it's a cyberspace reality where the mind is connected to and a bunch of minds are connected to, that means a bunch of human beings have just sat down, let's say, and closed their eyes, and anytime we see a human being that's closed their eyes in the future, we'll be like, that person's either in cyberspace or they're old school meditating. And you know what's crazy, guys? Like right now, we have mastered the teleportation of sound and image, right? Right now, my voice through the cyber medium, through a digital medium, is teleporting to anyone wherever they are in the world that they're listening. In the future, locations will be able to teleport to us. So literally this concept of, it's as if right now we're using our minds to work. In the future, we're going to be working in our minds. An individual... Oh yeah, I forgot to mention something. In the subtitle I've written post-paradigm of the shattered. So I have this, in my inner realms, I perceived something. So in my, let's say I wondered about the geometry of the current moment, and I followed its geometry to wonder how the future will happen. And something chaotic that may happen when I say post-paradigm of the shattered. You see, any technology that is introduced to the human being goes through testing. There's a beta test and whatnot. There's preliminary testing of the product. Now, what happens with a lot of products in just the economical sector is that the product is introduced to the market, but then the market engages it, and what happens? People write reviews on the product finds a place in people's universe, right? If it finds a bad place in their universe, they write a bad review. If it finds a good place, in some sense, if the product is deficient, it goes into, the good part of their universe. it's fascinating right now. Like, we have the concept in religion, or in religion there was the concept of, for example, possession, and there was the concept of, like, the person was possessed by ignorance, or they were possessed by the divine will. If the person was possessed by the divine will, that was like the logos, that was, they perceived that as decent. If the person was possessed by the ignorance, that means their past was consuming them. The future hasn't happened, we can't suffer about it. The present has no reference point other than the past, so we can't suffer, we can't have any reaction to the present moment unless we're comparing it to a past point. And I don't know, guys, I'm just trying to say, like, it's a privilege to be alive right now. To be an individual embodiment in an individual mind. The future generations, maybe 200 years from now, cyberspace is gonna become like a giant mechanical cube that's gonna vacuum, attention into it. Our retaliation to this, or our backup strategy, is that we create AI as close as possible to nature. And people in just the tech sector try to create, it's as if nature becomes the guru of the tech sector, of all nations. Because I don't know, guys, there's something cool about nature, that it's being without any thought necessary. It's only the human being that has thoughts on itself. A lot of the species in nature, it's as if they don't care if they get, it's as if I have never seen an animal get offended, right? I've seen an animal get disturbed by the presence of another animal, but an animal crows maybe. I can't say this 100%. Different species have different brains. Crows are, for example, if somebody attacks a crow, they say the crow can remember. Crows have good memory. So the crow remembers who hit it and becomes like the mortal nemesis, But what I'm trying to say is that whatever animals experience, it comes and goes. Unless they have a clinging memory like the crow or whatever. The whole idea is that inferior species actually experience no such thing as emotion. I'm not saying animals don't have emotion, they can't laugh or feel or love their, like a pet can love their owner. I'm saying they don't have conscious, egotized emotion. When the human being gets emotional, there's a story. The character is shaking in the story of their world. I feel the only day the mysteries of the world and the knowledge that is just waiting for us in the unconscious, in the collective unconscious, I feel there will come a day where human suffering will evaporate, where all hatred and destructive mentalities will become secondary, not primary. A day will come where human beings will abandon the inefficient emotions and the space of the mind becomes occupied with tackling the great mysteries of the realm. This will create honor in the educational system. I can just see it in academia, guys. Universities are, right now they're at the vending machine level. people are selecting something and it's dropping something, and dropping a curriculum. But in the future, the educational system will just be like a giant general's tent, where the professors are pretty much strategizing, and in some sense the whole classroom is getting ready to, in some sense, tackle the question. And the idea is that not that there isn't any stupid questions. Some people say no question is stupid, but I'll be honest, sometimes questions can be stupid, but but the idea is that we go towards questions that influence the most dimensions. That means a person trying to solve world hunger, that is like a very big question compared to a person just trying to solve their own hunger in the world, And it's very strange because there's the concept of karma. It's like whatever you do, you're building, it's going to have an influence on your future. Sometimes I feel the type of memory we create, or the last memory we create before our last breath, is literally the only memory left to reincarnate a sort of human framework from. Now, this is just from, I guess, a secular perspective. If I was to explain it in a collective way, it would be very dehumanized, where I would say there's never been human beings here. It's one field of intelligence. This one field of intelligence, it's like a field is moving particles, and the particles think they are moving themselves, but they're moving a tiny percentage of themselves. And literally a lot of nature is automated. So in a giant unknown automated system, right, we find ourselves being able to control our limbs and being able to control our attention in the outer realms and in the inner realms. Aside from that, either we have forgotten the greater use of the biological body, or in some sense we haven't discovered the greater use of the biological body. And there's nothing really to fear, because there's not, the moment collective mindhood happens, it could be that people may dislike being individuals. Can you imagine? Right now people are like, collective mind, Mr. Within, no way, Jose. I'll be like, my name's not Jose. But what I'm saying is, like, there will come a time where being an individual will be like medieval. Will be ancient. Imagine the first 100 years of collective cyberspace. That means imagine the imagination of 5 people were connected. And so people would not want to be alone. Everybody's going to try to go and find some sort of mind group to be a part of. The future is going to be incredible, because the heroes in the future will be those who actually have attained the witness. You see, in the Ribu Gita, so here's the thing. The Ribu Gita is this ancient book, and in this book, Vedic book, in this book it says there's 4 states of consciousness, or 4 important states of being. Or 4 states, let's say. One state is the conscious waking state. That's where I'm giving this talk, and everybody's hearing me from. The other state is the deep sleep state. We go into deep sleep. Then we might, in our deep sleep, come to the dream states. So, and then we come to the deep sleep, and then we wake up, right? It's as if the entrance to our dreams, the entrance and exit to our dreams, is the deep sleep state, which is just pure absence of consciousness. It's as if when we sleep, the world is blinking, So the Ribu Gita says that these are the 3 states of samsara, okay? Conscious waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. Now, in the Ribu Gita, it says there is a 4th state. And as a let's say new reader, you'll be like, a 4th state? No way. But the 4th state is actually the state that is witnessing all 3 at once. Do you understand? The fourth state means that there's a way you can be aware of being, of the nature of being, where if you're in deep sleep, you're still awake, but there is no embodiment that's awake. In your dream state, you're awake. You know the dreams as temporary as reality. In the conscious waking state, you know reality is as temporary as the dream. And so the witness, it's one witness in all these states. That means once remembered, it is like the unchanging quality to every moment of life endured. So this fourth state is a suggestion, because all those probabilities I told you of the individual where it's one mind, one body, of the individual collective where it's one mind, multiple bodies, where of the collective individual where there's multiple minds, one body, and the collective being, which is multiple minds, multiple bodies. These are all inside samsara. So all these are going through the trials and tribulations of nature, in the sense that there's a cyclical activity to living as an individual in an animate world. Okay? Now the fourth state would be a witness beyond the sensory. So if all these possibilities are that which is found in the domain of the sensory, if a person sees beyond the room of the senses, you in some sense have, how would I say it? That is the healthiest way for an individual to access the collective, That's what I'm saying. So I would conclude so far what I've said in this episode as the watcher within being untouched by the change. That means the eyes of our eyes have never moved. They have never seen or unseen. There is no verb or noun, haunting the infinite anywhere or in the book. So that's the thing, to me, a lot of people talk about religion, but they don't talk about honor. And honor doesn't mean one chunk of language has to dominate everything to be true. Honor means that before human beings spoke, there was something here. It was nature herself. An advanced civilization, I don't know why, but I feel maybe this needs to be said. An advanced civilization will treat its women as the queens of the future. And it will treat its men as the kings of the future. What that means is, for the first time, there has come a need for everybody to go as far as they can, because everybody's greatest exploration is the victory of the species. There is no more good and bad. There's just like how advanced things moved while we were here. And when I say good and bad, I mean in the inner realms, because I'll tell you, functioning with dualistic thought throughout the day is so energetically draining. That means a person who's trying to see good and bad in everything, you will drain yourself, But a person who just lets nature move, as if we are not living on the planet, or we are walking alongside the planet. That's the reverence of nature. That means to me, anybody who bows down when they are alone, if anybody listening to me right now, if you have found yourself one moment in this life where you have been alone with the universe, and you have bowed not as a sort of showing devotion to a superior ideal, but you have bowed because the universe is here. I don't know if people understand how fascinating and divine. It's like this is the heaven part of living, where there is possibility of eventhood. in a very strange cosmic scenario. There are not only I should say answers are right or wrong anymore. Their questions for the first time have become more important than the answers, because answers keep us occupied in inferior realities. A question adds a dimension, an answer takes away the question. In other words, it closes the dimension. Answers are just pretty much a sculptor's way of singularizing everything. In the inner realms, of course, in regards to ideological thought, because every person has an axis of belief and disbelief, regardless. That means when it comes to, like, if somebody says, hey man, do you believe like a dragon is like sitting at the roof of your apartment, you know? The person would be like, no man, get out of here, you know, with your dragons. It's as if we disbelieve the dragon, right? But when it comes to, for example, the idea of not littering, that idea is as invisible as the dragon, yet we keep it. We act as if it's real. So what has been going on is that even though it appears visually that there's one physical world, the mind has been accessing through two worlds. That means our minds access two dimensions, the body accesses one dimension. So because we're stationed in the mind, and free will starts really from the mind, or as the mind. An advanced civilization will be so advanced that it will, in some sense, come up with countermeasures to cyberspace domination. And it's very easy. In some sense, the only way it can be done, if cyberspace never connects to, never touches the human skin, you know, never goes beyond the boundary, beyond the kingdom, beyond the walls of the kingdom of the biological entity. Do you know? And the best way this can happen is if in the tech sector they invent a virtual reality system that it's just literally a room, an empty room. You could sit on the most comfortable chair. You go sit on that chair, and as you're sitting in that empty room, let's say, there is no goggles, nothing going, no wires connecting to your brain or anything, no chips installed in the brain. All you got to do is go sit in that room, and somehow the machine, and I'm saying this in the future, the room is going to, through wave technology, give us the cyberspace experience. That means there needs to be no connection of anything to the brain, as if we're an antenna, and we created a technology that could create that signal and connect us somehow. This way, if we focus on this, we actually create a possibility that anytime human beings get in cyberspace, if there's the slightest push, they can instantly disconnect. The moment they step out of the room, it's as if they've stepped out of that reality, cyberspace reality. Because we want to create things as natural as possible. Because we're natural beings. It makes no sense creating a future civilization that doesn't, you know, consider the biology's graceful evolution, you know. So guys, I'm gonna go into a code tunnel. Now here's the challenge. I wanted to go into a code tunnel of the collective mind, but there isn't probably many codes on that. or barely any. I would say I'm just looking up the theme is the idea collective. So I'm going to read quotes of human beings where somehow in their worldview of their quote, the concept of collective is there. So we enter the quote tunnel. Felicia Rashad. Anytime women come together with a collective intention, it's a powerful thing. Whether it's sitting down making a quilt, in a kitchen preparing a meal, in a club reading the same book, or around the table playing cards, or planning a birthday party. When women come together with a collective intention, magic happens. Yeah, pretty much any human mind that accesses their decency resonance and then cares for the evolution of the moment in some sense. The moment there's collective intention, it doesn't matter if you're a human being, it doesn't matter if you're an animal, if you're an alien, do you know what I mean? It's like human beings used to, ride vehicles that had 1 horsepower, which was literally a horse, right? And so that was a sort of symbiosis, as if with another species, as if we had the same intent and the horse had the same intent, and, rider and, the rider and the wheels just go into the, forest. Anyways, I want to keep going with this quote tunnel. Thomas Carlyle says, I do not believe in the collective wisdom of individual ignorance. Yeah, that's the era we're experiencing. That's the kind of dark ages we're in. We're in the dark ages of the inner realms, where there's still cruelty, violence, savagery, rather than efficient collaboration towards something that's better than what we're looking at, Elon Musk says really the only thing that makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. There you go. Spoken like a bodhisattva. Jimmy Chin says, I truly believe the intention of creating positive change is so important to the collective consciousness. When you have a group of people that have the intention and the capacity, talent, and intelligence to actualize those intentions, then you have something really powerful. Yeah, you have the momentum to build an advanced civilization. Elon Musk says brand is just a perception, and perception will match reality over time. Sometimes it will be ahead, other times it will be behind, but brand is simply a collective impression some have about a product. Bernie Sanders, unemployment insurance, abolishing child labor, the 40-hour work week, collective bargaining, strong banking regulations, deposit insurance, and job programs that put millions of people to work were all described in one way or another as socialist. Oh man, yet these programs have become the fabric of our nation and the foundation of the middle class. Yeah, guys, what is this, class system we have? We're all human beings on a rock. There should be just a sort of, not that we should completely get rid of a hierarchical system, but I'm saying, like, attention can fly to another branch of knowledge. We are birds when it comes to our attitudes being able to change in every moment. The bird can fly onto another branch. The human being can look at the moment from a different angle. H.L. Mencken says democracy is a pathetic belief in collective wisdom of individual ignorance. Oh my god. Democracy is better than, no democracy, I would say that. Vladimir Lenin. The press should not be only a collective propagandist and a collective agitator, but also a collective organizer of the masses. It's not the press, it's just any information human beings get, they gotta use that information, so they respond to it. It takes a very, I would say, I don't want to say disciplined mind, but it takes a very alert individual to notice that information doesn't have to be reality. Information is a part of reality, suggesting what all of reality could be. That means there's no way, like, in theology, you can say, like, you can say that the holy books are messages, correct? Like we have this view that, the messengers brought the message and there was revelation in theology. So all those people who are religious, the holy book is the message. But tell me this, when has a message been the messenger? Been the source of the message? When has anybody written a message? Imagine you send a text to your friend, and your friend reads that text and thinks that text is you. That means it doesn't think that it's like imagine your friend doesn't see you, but it's just the text. Do you know what I mean? That means the text be taken too seriously is like the holy books were fingers pointing to truth. If you take the fingers seriously, you miss out on the stars that they're pointing to. And that's where the artificial paradigms of fundamental religion kind of become agitatory, in reality. That means it's like people are their inner realms are being too extreme, right? Anytime the inner realms are extreme, the species gets tense. But really, humanity should just realize either we die alone or we die together. Now, because all men die, right? All human beings, they transition. Right now, I'm kind of like a candle. Every day I give these talks, I'm like, okay, the candle wax is melting. All great minds in history used what was accessible to them to see beyond what they saw. And the point was not worshipping the ideology. It's as if we worshipped objects, then we went to worshipping subjects, and we haven't stopped subject worship. But beyond subject worship, can you imagine being a religious person and trusting God so much that you cannot judge God's creation? You see, it's the same bizarre connection of metaphysics of the Native Americans, where they perceived there was a spirit to nature. Do you know? But when they were invaded by the colonizers, what happened was, in some sense, that was nature too, but how could one accept it was the greatest test of faith, And what's even incredible is that, just take this notion, right? So in native tribes, they didn't have a concept of land. And there's this story that Manhattan was bought for like $25 or something. Do you know? Because the natives had no concept of land. They're like, why is this person buying land? Do you know? Because the world was just one giant land. It hadn't been segmented yet. It was one giant unknown forest. Now it's been compartmentalized. And not that that's a bad thing, but it just provides a different scope of advantages and disadvantages. Like, I know that at some point in my life, now what are the options, right? Either the lights turn out instantly, the candle light is blown midway, or the candle light goes to the end and melts completely. The person gets really old, and eventually their consciousness, just through a sleepy manner, is dismissed. So there is a sudden exit, which it's as if like suddenly from the conscious reality, the unconscious pulls the person out of the conscious simulation, or the person is pulled or pushed out of the conscious simulation. Then the other angle is the person slowly is exiting. That means a old human being is like a multidimensional being piloting their consciousness very slowly. That means they're stretching out their multidimensionalism, But let's say a young person who passes away, that young person is like, that's a multidimensional being that's quickly, it's as if like beings that don't live long on this planet, it's as if they've just opened the door for a little bit to check out the dimension, and it's as if it's like when the person doesn't like it, they close the door and they leave. Now, of course, I don't want to say that it's fair for any individual to give imagery to the beyond, right? But poetry means, for the sake of exploration, we dared go further than the intellect. We dared wonder about the fringes of reason and where our reason is coming from if the edge of the universe is vast, right? And especially, we cannot be certain. That means this is the chaos that I'm just, for me, I feel science is mighty. Science has a very incredible legacy on our planet. But the issue is that we cannot test a changing universe. So we can never come up with a theory of a changing universe. Do you see? There is no way for us to be certain, and all our models are abstract until evidence kind of gives us hope a little. To treat the human being as a multidimensional being, to completely new era, right? Like through communication, when human beings speak, they're kind of creating a world. Somebody once said this and it changed my mind of communication. It blew my mind, right? So, when I was younger, I thought communication is just talking. But then I realized it's conscious world creation. And so it's as if every person is in some sense like a kingdom, and as they communicate, they're opening the doors of their kingdom. Do you see? The inner realms are very vast, and a person's mind can change. And not only do we need to have the physiology in balance, this is why I was like, if we have a sort of universal income, technically, if that system is properly implemented, or we find a proper way where it's workable and ingenious, then it would be a point where universal income will get rid of a lot of cruelty and a lot of sudden mind shift due to physiological circumstance being turbulent. So it's as if we are pilots in the space-time continuum as this attention. A part of us is piloting the biology, and a part of us is the whole space where everything's being piloted in. That means we're kind of the pilot of our individual body, but the passenger of the world, Emotions have a sort of hollowness, and this is why I think an emotional person is only seeking a simulation escape route. If one only, in some sense, perceives through emotion, that means emotion is a way where the body makes decisions without reason necessary. Isn't that incredible? A person can feel something and their whole behavior and mindset can change. Let's say you see a beautiful sunset and you've never seen a sunset, and you see that sunset and tears run down your face, and then you take a selfie, and then the glow of the sunset on your tears are even making you cry more. I feel that the future should not fear itself. It should be fascinated of what else there is. The leaders of humanity should not be smart or kind only. They should be those human beings who their whole life has come to the question of how else. That means all those people in politics, like, they should for a second go look in the mirror and be like, why am I here in this position? and realize that for the first time man can recalibrate any system to the current consciousness. And even though if I was to get into political science, the issue with politics is not per se the leaders are corrupt. The issue with politics is that no nation can have a political system that is as advanced as its most advanced citizen. So in other words, a political system is not there to be perfection, where it should be judged by the nation. A political system in some sense has the aim to enhance the survival of the species, and in some sense to treat human beings as tourists. We are literally tourists in manifestation. And what does that mean? That means we're travelers. We're not 8 billion just human bodies that can be controlled. We are 8 billion traveling, changing moments, right? And we have a conscious capacity, right? And if the civilization was smart, rather than enslaving skill, we would release it. It's as if it's as if the gods, this is not the case in Greek mythology, but I see a dimension to this where it's as if the gods had chained the Titans, and one of the gods were like, yo guys, why have we chained the Titans? Right? And the gods are like, they shouldn't in some sense be unchained. But then the god says, wait, aren't we gods though? What are we afraid of? Do you see? And so imagine the great power on this earth, the inner power, which is the intelligence. And of course the word intelligentsia has a sort of connotation in culture, but I use the term as a sort of cosmic intelligentsia. Anyways, guys, I'm going to go back to this quote tunnel. Talk's going everywhere tonight. Bertrand Russell says collective fear stimulates herd instinct and tends to produce ferocity toward those who are not regarded as members of the herd. Ariana Huffington. In a culture fueled by burnout, a culture that has run itself down, our national resilience becomes compromised, and when our collective immune system is weakened, we become more susceptible to viruses that are part of every culture because they're part of human nature. Fear-mongering, scapegoating, conspiracy theories, and demagoguery. Yeah, the moment we literally turn the world into a circus, absurdist psychology can literally make it very difficult to build an advanced civilization. That means it's as if imagine like a next level technology had come out, or imagine like the earth was a meteor was about to hit earth in a fictional universe, and as the meteor was about to hit earth, suddenly that moment where Batman was about to punch Joker in the face, like let's say in the Batman and Joker narrative, for a second both of them stopped and they're like, okay, maybe maybe we should try to get on this ship before the earth ends, right? So as if whatever archetypal relationship there was in the moment instantly vanished in the presence of another urgency, something more important. Henry St. John says liberty is the collective body, what health is to every individual body. Without health, no pleasure can be tasted by man. Without liberty, no happiness can be enjoyed by society. Steven Spielberg says you have many years ahead of you to create the dreams that we can't even imagine dreaming. You have done more for the collective unconscious of this planet than you will ever know. Mahmoud Darwish says, I don't decide to represent anything except myself, but that self is full of collective memory. There's a concept, guys, in Buddhism called the 12 interdependent origins. People should look that up. Something like that. Charles B. Rangel says, encouragement of higher education for our youth is critical to the success of our collective future. Yeah, the more advanced we are, the more we don't hold back, the farther the further the future's steps will be. That means the idea is whoever is alive right now, we try to go as far, we advance as far as we can, try to figure out the most efficient strategy, and then the moment we're done, the future generations will open their eyes and be like, yo, our ancestors ran a marathon, in their short lifetimes. In regards to the evolution, Carl Jung says the collective unconscious consists of fireworks. No, I'm joking. He doesn't say that. One day we'll hear the same sounds when there is collective peace. Carl Jung says the collective unconscious consists of the sum of the instincts and their correlates, the archetypes. Just as everybody possesses instincts, so he also possesses a stock of archetypal images. Yeah. So this is a quote that definitely deserves to be looked into. I'll make this the... Okay, I'll read one more quote and then I'll make this Carl Jung quote the last quote. Goran Persson says a peaceful world requires collective measures for the prevention of war, international cooperation to solve economic and social problems, and respect for human rights. So we want to build a future that is intelligent enough to care for all of itself, right? We care for healthy individuals, so time for a healthy species, but how? Right, and we're at that phase. So now, Carl Jung. So guys, when Carl Jung says the collective unconscious consists of the sum of the instincts and their correlates, the archetypes, so he means that the collective unconscious is, if it was a mathematical equation, it would be like all that you know plus all that you don't know equals one event, right? So when Carl Jung says the collective unconscious, the moment he's used the word unconscious, it has to be the sum of the instincts and their correlates. And the archetype, the way Carl Jung saw it, I think a great metaphor to share this with audiences is through the metaphor of a tree, where the roots of the tree are in a soil where we can't see. So the roots of certain archetypes that the human being is embodying is in the unconscious, in the soil of the unconscious. So that means we are a kind of known animal body somehow rooted in an unknown field of mind. And nobody's asking like, what's up with that? It's as if we've sit in a comfortable material chair and we use the word mind as if it doesn't mean anything. There is something called, there is imagination, but people say it's not real, and then the philosopher says, wait a minute, why is it there then? Why are there inner realms? Why have we as a species ignored this? Because let me tell you, to be aware of your inner realms, truly to go within, means to become a creature beyond language. That means if you have a moment in this life where for a moment you notice you're not the language is your projection, but that your is unknown. And when the unknown presence of your own intelligence and eyes finds you, you will perceive yourself for the first time as a universal human being before a universal, culturally conditioned human being. And it's an incredible feeling when you feel the emptiness of the universe being an ultimate permission for the new reformatting of any system. Emptiness strangely gives infinity an opportunity to express itself. And the second part of the quote, Carl Jung says, just as everybody possesses instincts, so he also possesses a stock of archetypal images. That stock of archetypal images is literally like an iceberg in an ocean of information. The moment the iceberg is not the iceberg, it becomes like purely liquid. It is the whole ocean. So there is no accessing the Akashic records, there is being the Akashic records, and then you come back to your individualism. So it's like a drop that fell into the ocean, and then when it fell into the ocean, it was the Akashic records. But imagine somebody like scooping a cup of water from the ocean, you know, it's like that would be literally the drop has separated. This is why love is very powerful, because love only comes from a state that has noticed where home is, the true home of one's nature. That means those human beings who, let's say on this planet there's 8 billion human beings. Let's say these 8 billion human beings, somehow we could, from an aerial view, observe their lives and realize, okay, a percentage of them lived as cruel human beings, and a percentage of them lived as very loving human beings. If we were to look at the loving human beings from an aerial kind of rewinding the film of their lives, we would see that those individuals who loved, it's as if they are from a different star tribe. That means it's like beyond good and bad. If you look at the geometry of moments, they're all strange. That means for the first time someone in history is saying the familiar is strange. How we have the concept of something being even familiar to us, because the world is always changing. So the development of memory is not only just it's as if it's like we can't tell. It's like if you look at it from the past, your mind has memory. If you look at it from the future, your mind has imagination. But it's all one event of mind, one film being played on the physical film. So that stock of archetypal images means if you go beyond an individual that is identifying with a certain world, you go to a state where before there's an individual and there's a world, there's just all information at once. Sri Ramana Maharshi called this, you realize that as if it's all in this on the screen of pure consciousness, all worlds. Do you understand that, guys? That means I'm saying there's a huge chance that truth was never in an illusion and we were never here. So fear in a multidimensional system has no meaning. And believe it or not, courage has no meaning either. And so the era of, I would say, the inner pilots of humanity begins, you know. So many advanced communicators are going to be born, and these advanced communicators are going to look at the world and with the assistance of technology have incredibly deep ways to go into it, right? Like right now as I'm talking 100% in the future, they're going to see all my blind spots and I'm going to be judged like every person in history who in some sense is noticed. That person in history, like everybody in the future sees the blind spots of those in the past. So I know in the future people will see the blind spot of me when I talk in the past. So the challenge is how far they're gonna see that I saw them. So my challenge in speaking in the present is try to actually be in the future before I speak. That's my challenge. Pretty much I've existed as a being to as if some people are here to work with their past lives, some people are here to work with their future lives. And the life of the future is the life of the species. It goes beyond individualism. And if we trust nature, we have already achieved victory. If we distrust nature, then technology is going to adopt us. So aim for the natural wherever you are. So I'll open it up to Q&A for a couple minutes. If there's no questions, then in the trenches of the language wars, in a time where the multidimensional can no longer be ignored, the moment the species realizes behind our eyes we're not an object or a subject, it's gonna be the moment where man and God are inseparable, theologically. And from a secular view, it would mean we attained universal consciousness. From a completely secular standpoint, that means no narrative, but in regards to just man became the universe suddenly. You know, guys, the inner realms is so profound. It can not only visualize an empty moment of self, it can not only visualize the whole moment being everything. That means everything in a singularity with everything, or an individualism. The mind cannot only, the mind can also in the inner realms fathom reality to be just chaos and order, battling it out till the end of time. And the mind can even fathom the infinite self. And I will tell you, this is where the greatest philosophers of the future generation will be born. Those who were wondering about the implications of temporary human psychology, extending either through cyberspace and nature towards a collective movement, right? That means it's either we're like a collective being remembering itself from individual moments, or we are individuals and there is no collective being, or we're individuals and there's a collective being, but we, in our full expression as individuals, are that collective being. It's as if, it's as if a person is made of the cells in their body, and the way the cells in the body are. And if humanity is part of a universal body, the way we are suggests the health of the universe. When individuals access collective fields naturally, man's ego will be nature's greatest invention, the restoration of the final memory. That means anybody who somehow sees through the eyes of the nature of their whole moment, something in life will be like a synchronistic sign and show you that you've finished the simulation. You've finished an archetypal simulation. That means an archetype is a certain characteristic in a story. So once that character completes whatever story it is in, it's as if the simulation is complete. And because in life we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know if the pilot's going to land the airplane through old age gracefully, or the pilot's going to suddenly eject out of the plane of existence. So that means we have to have a sort of Zen moment-to-moment approach where it's high-quality moments, but in regards to our observance, kind of like we take notes from the Zen masters. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Namaste.